Good evening, High Five Live. Here we are on our first real church site. Again, we've had some awesome experiences today. Hopefully, you've been following along as we went to Plymouth and then went to the Paul Revere Monument. But here we are at the birthplace of the prophet Joseph. If you, I'll just kind of pan around here and get out of the picture. But here's his home. Um, and then up the stairs here is the monument that's been built to the prophet Joseph. Um, and and then I'll just, because it's so gorgeous today, I'm gonna just span. Here's the visitor centers, Corey and Pam, and an amazing park back behind him, and another visitor center here. And then joining me today is one of the experts in the church. He's so humble, but Daren is it takes tour guides and is on the training services for the seminaries and institutes, and his primary responsibility is taking tours to these sites, and has spent a lifetime studying these places and has some really neat experiences. And we've asked if he'll join us today and share some of these stories and insights specifically about here in Sharon and the birthplace of the prophet Joseph Smith. So, Daren, we're going to turn some time over to you to share these experiences with us. Again, just invite all of you to jump on, share this, and enjoy the birthplace of the prophet Joseph.
Well, thank you so much, Dave. It really is a thrill for me to be with you. And when I say that, this virtual thing is not quite as much fun as really being with you. So, I mean, we're being really careful with social distancing today, I guess. But yeah, you're in a beautiful spot there. And I wish that I was with you at this moment. But what a thrill it is for me to be here on High Five Live. And I'm so grateful for this opportunity. Appreciate the goodness that you all bring to everybody with these amazing videos, and especially this week with the church history sites. What a blessing that's going to be for everyone to take part in. So thank you very much. I'm really thrilled to be here. And as you're looking at this very special place, friends, I wanted to just share with you to start off a quote from Truman Madsen. I love what he said about this very quiet and humble place. And so I'm going to start with that because it really sets the tone for some of the things we're going to discuss about this site. He said, "In the history of religion, beginning with Abraham, the father of all nations, it is as if every 600 years an inspired person arises who influences his entire posterity and beyond. 600 years after Abraham, Moses on Mount Sinai, amidst its thundering and lightnings, receives the law. 600 years later, we reach the time of Buddha, Confucius, and Isaiah. 600 years later, we reach the time of the meridian of time, the central figure of all, Jesus the Christ. 600 years later, Muhammad comes on the scene. And in another 600 years, St. Francis, Aquinas, each in his own tradition, a powerful figure. 600 years later brings us to 1800. Then what? Who is the figure to come in that century who will influence the future, called of God in the culminating dispensation to prepare for the second coming of Christ? The answer is generated in the most unlikely of places, in an obscure mountain village in Vermont." I've always loved that quote and trying to understand exactly what that means when you're in Sharon and hear the beautiful birds, and if you're there at this time of year in the summer, and you can just get a sense for how sacred that ground truly is where the prophet Joseph was born. You know, the year 1805 actually proved to be a very interesting year, and a lot of historical things happened that were very important. You had Thomas Jefferson, who was the president of the United States at the time. You had Lewis and Clark reaching the West Coast on their expedition. You had the Industrial Revolution going on in England. You had Admiral Lord Nelson, who ended Napoleon's bid for the naval supremacy and basically in the Battle of Trafalgar took things over there. These big events were going on at the time. And then you had in this quiet village in 1805, on a cold winter day, December 23rd, a baby boy being born that none of these powerful figures on the earth seemed to even notice. And in these humble circumstances, Joseph got his start. And it's interesting that he was born December the 23rd, because that is the beginning of the winter solstice. And if you look carefully on the calendar and see when that occurs, that is when the daylight begins to return to the earth. The prolonged darkness has ended, the days get longer, and what an amazing thing that is to think that that's when the prophet Joseph was born, when daylight returns. The first hymn in our hymn book, I love The Morning Breaks. It tells us this: the morning breaks, the shadows flee, lo, Zion's standard is unfurled. The dawning of a brighter day, majestic, rises on the world. So the prophet Joseph was born at a very symbolic time during that winter solstice when light was returning to the earth. Well, how did they end up, Joseph Sr. and Lucy Mack, how did they end up there in this little tiny place in Vermont? Well, basically in August of 1804, Lucy Mack's father, Solomon, Joseph's grandfather, had come to that area, and he purchased 100 acres on Dairy Hill, which is where the home stood, where the prophet was born. And it seemed that Solomon wanted to be up in that area because he had a couple of sons. One of them was Stephen Mack, who lived in Tunbridge and had a thriving business there. And his other son, Daniel Mack, lived right there near the birthplace in Sharon. And Solomon moved there to seemingly be closer to his sons. And if you go behind the monument and down the hill, you can still see today very clearly the foundations of the homes where Solomon and Daniel lived. And there's an old turnpike road that is down there behind the monument. There are still visible signs of that road. That was the main artery at that time from Boston all the way to Montreal. And so they got a lot of traffic through there, stagecoaches, a lot of people coming through, which ended up being a blessing to the Macks. And the old stone bridge is still there as well, very visible today. Lucy Mack made her way up to Tunbridge, very nearby the birthplace site here, in 1794, so 10 years before her father bought the land that you're seeing right here. And she came up to Tunbridge with an invitation from her brother Stephen. Lucy had been taking care of her older sisters, Levisa and Lovina. They were both sick with consumption, as they called it, tuberculosis, and it took their lives. And it just took a toll on Lucy. She had had such a hard time. And so Stephen said, come and live with me, and you can work in the store, and I'll help you to save some money. And so she went up to Tunbridge, and that's where she met Joseph Sr. Just a short distance, about 15 minutes from the birthplace site here, is where Joseph's parents met and fell in love. They lived in Tunbridge for about 6 years on a farm, and then they decided to kind of venture out a little bit, and they went to nearby Randolph. And it was there that they started a mercantile business, built a store, and thought that were going to live the American dream, probably. Things didn't go so well. The business started to fail, and Joseph Sr. was going to rely on another business venture, and that American wild ginseng, which he had put his hopes and desires in. And there was a man that was nearby him by the name of Stevens, who came up to him and offered Father Smith $3,000 for his shipment of ginseng. But Joseph Sr. thought that was only about 2/3 of the value, and so he turned down that offer from Mr. Stevens and put his shipment on the boat to go to China. Now, it just so happens that Mr. Stevens' son was on that same boat taking his shipment of ginseng over to China, and he stole every bit of Joseph Sr.'s ginseng, sold it there, took all the money, came back, went up to Joseph Sr. and gave him a chest of tea as his reward for his ginseng, and telling him that the value of it had fallen off the market and was no longer there in China. And so Lucy and Joseph have now lost thousands of dollars. They've got a failing business. Now what? What do? Well, they go back to Tunbridge and they try to sell Joseph Sr.'s farm. It's worth $1,500. He gets $800 out of it. Lucy Mack received a dowry from her brother Stephen that she was working for. $500 from him and $500 from his business partner gave her $1,000. They took that $1,800, paid off all of those debts that they had because that's who they were. They were good, honest people. That's what led them here to Sharon. They needed a place to live, and Lucy's father heard about their plight, invited him to come there and live in that little tiny home. Dave's going to get the camera up for us in just a second up by the foundation markers of that home so you can take a good look at what that site was like. While he's making his way there to show you that, one other very difficult thing that happened during that time with all the business failures was Lucy Mack also got consumption like her sisters, and they thought that she was going to pass away. And I'm just going to share with you one thing that she said. It really helps us to see who this woman was and the parents of the prophet. And there's the home site markers, and I'll talk about that in just a second. But as she was on her deathbed and doctors said she would die, Lucy wrote the following: "I'm not prepared to die, for I do not know the ways of Christ. I looked to the Lord and begged and pleaded with him to spare my life, and I made a solemn covenant that if God would let me live, I would endeavor to serve him according to the best of my abilities." In a few moments, my mother came in and looking upon me, she said, "Lucy, you are better." I replied as my speech returned that instant, "Yes, mother. The Lord will let me live if I'm faithful to the promise which I made to him." I continued to gain strength, but my mind was considerably disquieted, wholly occupied upon the subject of religion. As soon as I was able, I made all diligence in endeavoring to find someone capable of instructing me more perfectly in the ways of life and salvation. She attended a Presbyterian church, and then she wrote this: "I fixed my mind with breathless attention to the spirit and the matter of the discourse, but all was emptiness, and it fell upon my heart like the chill. Nothing could satisfy the craving hunger of my soul, and with a grieved and troubled spirit, I returned home saying, 'There is not on the earth a religion which I seek.'" Does this not sound familiar with her young son in Palmyra? Concluding it was her duty to be baptized, Lucy said, "I found a minister who was willing to baptize me and lead me free in regard to joining any religious denomination." So that's the mother of the prophet. You're looking there at the home site now. And this is amazing that we're able to still see some of these things. The very stone you're looking at right there in the center of your screen is an original piece to the home. It was the outside doorstep. There's a marker on it that tells you that that's an original outside front porch doorstep. Isn't that awesome? Take a look at that. And then there's a marker in the middle there that tells you that that's where the hearthstone once stood, and that is now down in the visitor center, the fireplace hearthstone. And you would think that being born on a cold winter day when Prophet Joseph was, that as a little tiny baby there, he probably spent a lot of time there by that hearthstone. And now look at that. As you look at that little site, think about it. It was about 800 square feet is all, 1.5 stories tall. It was very typical for the New England homes of that day. And Joseph and Lucy moved there with Alvin, Hiram, and Sophronia. And then, of course, Joseph is born here. And they end up living here for about 3 years as tenant farmers. And that's what they were at the time. Now, as you look at the home here, if you were to enter where that doorstep is and go off to your right, that is where the bedroom was. And so Joseph was born, we believe, on that side of the home right there. And it's interesting because the line that separates Sharon and Royalton goes right down the middle of the home there. And so because Joseph was born on that side of the home, we're pretty sure that he was born on the Sharon side. So it's kind of interesting to get a good look at that beautiful site and see the size of that home. What a tiny little humble cottage where the prophet was born, and some original pieces still there for you to see even today. Now, in 1905, we had a man by the name of Junius Wells who was standing right here where High Five Live is today. And he looked over this site, and it looked a little different then because it was overgrown. There were trees that were covering some of this where the home was. And it was nearing the birthday, the December 23rd day. And Junius Wells thought, this was a shame. We should own this land, and we should put up this beautiful monument to honor the prophet Joseph for 100 years. And so he wrote the brethren, he got permission. He bought 68 acres of land here and started getting an obelisk put in. Now, Junius Wells was the son of Daniel H. Wells, and most of you have heard his name in our church's history. Look at that beautiful monument. An obelisk was used because it was really widely used in that day to commemorate heroes of the past. And he really thought, Brother Wells thought that Joseph deserved that. So as you're looking at that, it's polished granite. It's 38 and a half feet tall. That's 1 foot for every year of the prophet's life. Now that's just the obelisk. As you're looking at that entire monument there, the entire thing is over 50 feet high, and it weighs just under 100 tons. And in the foundational piece, it's kind of fun to realize that there's a copper box there. And in that copper box in 1905 at the dedication, they placed some items from that era. You've got a set of scriptures from 1905. You've got portraits. There's some books there and some other documents that they wanted to put in a time capsule there in the monument. And so that's the obelisk, solid, beautiful granite there in honor of the prophet Joseph, 38 and a half feet high. Now, the journey to get that there was absolutely incredible. As you look over these beautiful grounds, and it's amazing when you're there, when it's opened up, and we're hoping that'll be very soon, you can hear this beautiful music through the trees, and the ground is just quiet and sacred. In fact, Corey and Dave, I guess I'll just ask if you would like me to take another minute. I'll be happy to talk about the journey of the monument getting there to the site.
Yeah, in fact, what I was going to mention too is we wanted to share a couple things and then maybe see if some could ask some questions.
Absolutely, yeah, you bet.
So why don't we do this? We're going to jump over. We're going to end this High Five Live, and on our main site, the High Five Live. All of you watching right now, hopefully, are members of our VIP for free, which is where we're going to jump over to right now, and join us there. We're going to obviously hear this awesome story about this monument getting here, and I've got a few thoughts to share, but also be thinking of some questions for, obviously Daren has done his work and knows about this site and about the birth of the prophet Joseph. If any questions that you have, Corey will be reading those off for us, and we can maybe take a couple questions. So let's jump off of this one. Again, thank you all. Tomorrow we're traveling tonight, but we'll be going to Palmyra and be in the Sacred Grove tomorrow morning. We'll be there with Steve Harper and the piano guys, and it will just be an awesome experience there.
It's going to be awesome.
Smith home. So but that'll be again, and just right now, if you jump over VIP for free, we've got several links there on our site already, but click over there, and Daren and I are going to jump over to that site. So thank you, Daren, so much, and we'll see you in just a second.
My pleasure. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.